And then the topic of this is gasless UX. So we'll put together how you use these products to actually deliver a gasless UX, and then James will actually do a demo. Maybe the first ever gasless transaction on Sui, so should be interesting. So our first product is a node service. It makes it really easy to read and write to the Sui blockchain without having to manage your own nodes. So, I mean, essentially, any team that's building on Sui needs a node service to be able to read and write to the chain, and you have three options. You can run your own nodes, in which case you have to stay on top of constant updates, devnet, testnet, breaking changes. You have to, scale up to multiple nodes. When you scale up to multiple nodes, there are data consistency issues, and then you have to stay on top of crashes. The other thing you can do is use public endpoints, which I think is great to get started, but long-term, public endpoints can't support really high traffic, especially from individuals that need to rate a little bit. So when you're ready, basically, for production traffic, that's when you might use a hosted service like Shinami. We provide high reliability, scalability with data consistency, quality support, basically zero maintenance. Everything just works and you can rewrite the chain. For anyone that wants to use this service, you can sign up, and we have a specific referral code for folks, so you can get free access to the service, and we have a WebSocket and RPC up right now. The topic of this conversation is gas station. Being able to deliver a zero gas fee user experience for apps that are trying to onboard, billions of users. I think there's a subset of apps that might not care about onboarding everybody, but the whole goal for Sui is to bring digital asset ownership to billions of people. And if you want to do that, you need to make the user experience more friendly. Gasless UX is one of the ways to do that. So we'll go into a little bit about how the gas station helps facilitate gasless UX. So the first thing is, when you're onboarding new users and you require them to have gas, this is a really big barrier for getting a new user onto your app. It means the new user has to go to a centralized exchange, go through a KYC process, be able to get through that KYC process, buy some Sui, send it to an external wallet like an Ethos wallet, and then connect to an application. That's a lot of steps. You're going to lose a bunch of folks. Like, if I told my mom to do this, it's like no chance, right? So if you want to get a billion users, you need to have a much cleaner onboarding experience that doesn't require all those different steps, and that can be gasless. And so that's the first part of what we think will enable with Gas Station is any apps that want an initial onboarding experience where you can at least get started, do some things on the app before having to go through some experience of having to buy Sui tokens. And so that's the first part of what we expect Gas Station to be used for. And this is the typical UX that you see in Web3. This is not going to work long term. If you're going to compete with, remember, we're not just competing with other Web3 apps. I think games that are building in Web3 need to think about competing with Web2 games. And so this UX is just not going to work. So, go to the next slide. The UX should be, I get to the game, I don't know anything about crypto, and I want to mint a character, I want to get an item, and it just works. And behind the scenes, us crypto people would know that it required gas. But for that new user, they shouldn't have to go through the pain points, again, of the friction of having to go to the exchange and get Sui to get started to do anything on that. Next slide. We also imagine, not just for onboarding, I think a lot of people will have creative customer acquisition strategies by going gasless, but I also expect some apps are going to have user engagement strategies where they want to incentivize particular behavior on their app, and they do it by making it gasless. So an example could be a governance node, where you want more people to participate in governance, so you make it gasless. I think for a lot of games, they're even thinking about the full gaming experience being gasless. And again, this is where the gas station would facilitate all of that. So the way the gas station works is very similar to the node service. There are apps that want to enable this gasless experience, and we just want to provide really simple APIs that make it as easy as possible for any of the apps to implement these types of strategies. And the way we do that is we do all the handling of gas management, tracking of gas, refueling of gas, optimizing gas for the particular transactions that the users are trying to make. And the app just needs to leverage our gas station and a few simple endpoints to be able to implement their strategies. So it's really just 4 simple steps. There's an end user. They want to initiate a transaction. In a game context, maybe the first step is creating a game character. So they want to create a game character, and let's imagine they don't know anything about crypto. The normal experience would be what we showed before. Insufficient balance, you got to go to the exchange, you got to get sweet. What we want instead is the app, in this case the game, realizes what the user is trying to do, and then constructs a gasless transaction for sponsorship and sends that to the gas station. The gas station would then take this, now has the context, and would attach a signed gas object to what the player that doesn't have gas is trying to do. And then the last step would be the app getting the end user signature to actually execute that transaction. And the end user didn't have gas the whole time. We just, as the gas station, assign the gas object for their transaction. Here's the next slide. So really, it just boils down to 3 simple endpoints that you need to hit. So for the app, they request the sponsored transaction to the gas station, and they hit the sponsored transaction endpoint. They might want to track the status of the sponsored transaction, so there's another endpoint for tracking the status. And the last thing is, once they have the gas object attached to the transaction, they just need to submit it. So it's really just 4 steps, 3 simple endpoints, and now you can, the app can just focus on the strategies of how they want to implement gasless UIs. So this is kind of a high level, and then James can actually give a live demo on DevNet, hopefully everything's working, to show you how this actually works behind the scenes.
All right, everyone, so we're going to try, as Nikhil described, we're going to do a demo on DevNet. This is live, so let's hope the live demo gods are being generous today. Alright, so for the purposes of this demo, what we're going to try to do is, we have 2 wallets here. We have a wallet on the left and a wallet on the right. The one on the left does have a Cappy NFT. You can see this guy has a teardrop tattoo. That means it serves some hard time. Anyway, so we're going to try and send this Cappy from this wallet, it's called the sender wallet, into the recipient wallet. But if you look into the sender wallet, you'll notice it has 0 sweet tokens. So if we try to send it via the wallet, it'll give us this message that's insufficient balance. So let's see if we can leverage sponsored transactions to try and send this Cappy from one wallet to another. So the first thing we need to do, we need to gather some of the parameters here. So things we need to know, we need to know the addresses of the 2 wallets. So we'll call this the sender wallet. So this will be sender. And we'll get the recipient wallet here. We'll copy this address. And then we also need the object ID of the Cappy that we're trying to send. Copy this. We'll call this object. Alright, so now let's go back and load our wallets. Alright. So we have all the parameters. The first step that we need to do is to construct the gasless transaction payload. So what this is very similar. This is very similar if you use the transaction builder methods from the Sui JSON RPC. For example, Sui transfer object. What it does is it spits out this, it's a BCS serialized base 64 encoded string, and it's just a payload that represents what you're trying to do. So in this case, this is very similar to that full Sui transaction builder method, except it does not have any of the gas context attached to it. So this payload right here just encompasses what we're trying to do, which is send this object from this sender to this recipient. So let's say this as gasless data. Okay, and so now that we have the gasless data, what we want to do is to sponsor it, because again, This can't be processed by the network because there's no gas object attached to it. So this is where we send this payload to the Shinami gas station, and the endpoint, as Nikhil pointed out in the previous slide, is just called sponsor transaction. We pass in this gasless data payload. And one thing here is that we have pushed the responsibility of specifying the gas budget now to the sponsor. So the sponsor has to determine what it feels is an appropriate budget for this transaction. In this case, I'm just setting it as 5,000 mix. Well, and one thing I do want to point out, this forming this gasless transaction payload currently is not yet available in the SDKs. We have been working with the Missing team. They will be getting this out soon. It will be available in the TypeScript and Rust SDKs. Okay, so behind the scenes, what happens? Shinami, the gas station, we take this gasless data payload, we unpack it, and we're able to now select a gas object from our inventory. We take that gas object, and then we attach it to this transaction, and then we're able to re-encode it. So now this transaction bytes that we see here, this is the newly re-encoded BCS serialized base64 transaction that now has the gas context attached to it. So we'll call this transaction data. We also now get a signature. So now, if you use something like the native Sui transfer object transaction builder, it assumes that the sender is also the owner of the gas object. So if you want to submit this transaction and get it processed, you just need one signature because the sender and the gas object owner are one and the same. What's new about gasless transactions now we decouple that, right? So the gas station Shinami is now the owner of the gas object, and there's a separate owner which owns this capybara. So in this case, we need two signatures. This is the first one. This is the signature of the gas station. Okay, there we go. So we'll call this gas save. And then we also return this transaction digest. This is mainly just for tracking purposes. We'll call this transaction digest. All right, so we have that data saved. And from the perspective of a gas station, this is, we provision a gas object so it's ready for execution. And as Nikhil mentioned, there is an endpoint from the gas station that lets you check the status. So right now, if we were to call that and we pass in this transaction digest, you'll see that it says it's pending. So again, the gas station is just waiting for it to get executed now. So again, the last bit of information in order to get this executed is we need this last signature, which is the signature of that transaction from the owner of the capybara. So we have the sender address, we have the private key, and we're just going to use the Sui key tool to sign it, and we're passing in that fully formed transaction data payload. So this gives us the last signature we need. So we'll save this as sender sig. Okay. And now we have all the data. All that's left to do is to submit this to the network for execution. And we're just going to use the Shinami node service here. We're going to call Sui submit transaction. We've passed in the transaction data. And then the two signatures that are needed. We have the sender signature and the gas signature. And there we go. So it looks like it went through and look. So the Cappy transferred from this wallet to this wallet. And so yeah, so for this demo, again, we went into details to show you step by step behind the scenes what's happening. But just to re-emphasize, at the end of the day, in order to use this, it's just these three methods, right? So we just want to recap. We have a sponsor transaction call. We have a get sponsor transaction status for you to check the status of the transaction that you sponsored, and then we have the ability to submit that transaction to the network for execution. And one last thing I want to cover is for the gas station, we do have this dashboard that allows you to see the status of all the sponsored transactions that you put out there. And as you can see, this just happened a minute ago, the one that we just sent. It does show up here, and it has a link. This is the transaction digest. And it just links directly to the Sui Explorer, and you can see more details on this transaction that happened. You see the sender, the recipient. You can see, remember how we specified, the sponsor was able to specify 5,000 mix as the gas budget. For this transaction, it only took 164 minutes to execute. But yeah, so that is the sponsored transaction demo.
Any questions? This was that was a real demo on that. So this will be available probably in the coming weeks for any apps that have a completely gas free.
Where does the sponsor money come from?
Well, in DevNet we have kind of unlimited sponsored gas money.
I'm going to ask the question.
It was, where does the actual gas money come from?
Yeah, so again, for DevNet, we have somewhat unlimited sponsored gas money, and we'll just sponsor everything. The way it will work after that, we're still kind of working out, but we would expect, we'll have kind of like AWS credits, we'll have gas credits for apps, and then the long term would be you're kind of pre-funding your own account, and you can do that with Fiat or with Sui, and then you use that for your gasless UX.
Could be, possible that could be an investment opportunity for advertisers and things like that as well.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, we're open to ideas.
Any other questions? Yes.
What prevents me from using this and just exhausting the gas for myself?
Are you talking about like debit or as a user, like someone who gets the sponsored transaction?
Well, let's say somebody sets up the transaction sponsorship and some malicious user comes along, I don't know, some hacker, whatever, and tries to exhaust all the sponsorship for himself.
Well, so the sponsor should have, so the different parties involved, there's a sponsor and then there's the user. The sponsor is sponsoring the transactions on behalf of the users. So the sponsor should have, and we're going to build up, you do have a lot of controls in place where the sponsor can place limits on how much, they get to decide, as you saw in the demo, how much they want to put towards each transaction. So there is kind of this final approval step that the sponsor gets to say, hey, this transaction you want to sponsor? Yeah, this looks good. Let me send it to the gas station, and then I'll send it to you for final approval. Yeah, so there's a kind of like built-in controls to allow the sponsor to control what transaction it wants to approve or not.
I'd say for better or worse, the app or the sponsor has full control of the logic of when they want to sponsor.
So it's up to the sponsor to prevent simple attacks.
Right, maybe they're giving, for new users, they're sponsoring all transactions, but then someone tries to use it and just create a lot of new accounts. But it depends on what you would actually get out of it, right? Does the user get that much from it? Does the app have a way of enforcing this? Can you stop bots? Can you rate them in? We'll have some of that in place on our side, but it's mostly on the app to decide how they're going to.
And there is one more thing we didn't cover yet in this demo, which is the expiration. So when you sponsor a transaction, you do have the ability to specify an expiration on that gas audit. So if you say, hey, this is only good for 1 day or 1 week, after that time period, the user can no longer use that. So you can't really lock out any of these objects for an indefinite period of time.
Yes. Any question here?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you put any thoughts into privacy. So one of the applications I see this is, for instance, one of the bad reactions that I've experienced in the past in other ecosystems was that every time I want to create a new address or new wallet, I have to send funds to that wallet. And then in the end I just have dozens of wallets with dozens sitting there, right? So it was pretty cool to basically just centralize that in one wallet which funds all the
So like, gasless UX has been explored a little bit on ETH, but hasn't really taken off. I think in part because most of ETH is DeFi, and it's like, we're playing the DeFi casino, we'll go through the bad UX to play the DeFi casino. I think the other part that makes it hard is that to really implement sponsored transactions properly, there's a lot of different priorities that need to coordinate. So the end users is interacting with the app through wallets. You need wallets on board, you need apps on board that are doing sponsorship, and then you need a gas station. And so I can imagine at times the wallet will just be the interface for signing the sponsored transaction for the app. But I could also imagine the wallet at times, like an Ethos wallet, might actually be the app, might be the sponsor at other times as well.